You're watching Business Access TV.
Business Access.
Business Access.
Business Access.
Business Access.
You are watching Business Access TV.
Business Access TV.
Serious about business.
Serious about business.
The ICAJ hosts their annual business conference here at the Jamaica Pegasus under the theme Megatrends 3.0, Changing Times, Changing Strategies. I'm your host, Mita Prasad Webb. Please stay tuned for highlights.
The world is changing. We're talking about this everywhere I go. The pace of change is unprecedented. And so, yes, I know we're accountants, but our acumen on technology, we're going to have to beef it up. We're going to have to know about big data, cloud, cybersecurity, virtual reality. This is not an environment of tomorrow where you can say, well, I'm just a numbers person. Those days are over. And so today, what we're talking about is that technology makes things a little more seamless. So we always talk about what happened with Blockbuster. We talk about what happened with Kodak. These are case studies that'll be around for years and years. But unfortunately, there are some iconic companies that will be case studies as well. It'll be Radio Shack, might be Yahoo, it might be Toys R Us, it might be Borders. There are companies that I grew up with that I thought would always be here, and yet they're gone. So the question is, will you be here in 3 to 5 years? Will your company be here in 3 to 5 years? And what are you doing about it today to make sure that you will be? So when we talk about the world, I meet people who will say, well, Kimberly, I'm just here in my bubble. No one's going to touch it here. Guess what? I was here before I was here. I've been communicating with your team at the Institute of Chartered Jamaican Accountants for probably close to 6 to 7 months. And so if that is the case, that means that just me not physically being here isn't something you're just like, oh, she's not here, I shouldn't be worried. You should be worried because technology means we're only one click away. And so as Jamaica grows and the economy grows, what you don't want is for companies to bring in other accountants. Because you are the supply, you are the experts, you are the professionals. When they're looking for someone to build a new practice area or to lead a new division, they should be here with the Jamaican accountants. It shouldn't be, oh, we got to pull someone else from the U.S. or another island or here or there. Now, that could be what they want to do, but they shouldn't have to do. And so when we talk about change and what does that mean, there's good news and bad news. The good news is, as a profession, we're purposeful, we're data-driven, we don't like ambiguity. We're really good at giving you answers. We're organized. We like checklists because most of us prefer to go down checklists. We're compliant. We make sure we're following the rules. We're rule followers. We're all of those things. And no matter where I go, there are some things about us that are the same no matter where I go. And that's the good news. The bad news is that we're purposeful. We're data-driven. We don't like uncertainty. Because in a time where you have to be innovative, in a time where you need ideas that are so out there that someone says, that'll never work. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the ideas that people would say would never work. Because what I know is this, surely they told Larry Ellison that. Surely they probably told Bill Gates that. Surely they told Mark Zuckerberg that. Surely they told any one of the leaders who are here today and are billionaires, they said that'll never work. That's the innovation that we have to open up our minds and hearts to. And that's what we have to recognize in the megatrend environment of changing times. Recognizing that what we do and how we do it has to evolve and change. So we've got some trends. And I'll just give a couple of things that I do to stay abreast of everything. And I know it's hard because you're like, Kimberly, it's so much. I've got kids, I've got work, I've got elderly care, parents, elder care I need to do. I get it. It is busy. But somehow you've got to figure out how to source the information when you need it. Now, for me, I have a lot of different data sources. I've got FASB alerts, SEC, the Journal of Accountancy, the Maryland Statement. I've got the Fortune, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, all of these different alerts coming into my phone and into my email so that I'll know what's going on in the business world around me. Because you can't ask really good questions. You can't manage risk if you're isolated. That's why understanding the trends around you are so important, because you're going to miss something if you don't pay attention. And so, yes, you've got to pay attention to Brexit. You've got to pay attention to what's going on in Venezuela and geopolitical instability. Your companies could be multinational, and there's opportunities for you to go and work in different offices. Yes, you have to pay attention to what's going on in the financial world as it relates to who's able to pay their bills and who's going to bankrupt on their obligations, and who, with the tariffs that are currently, that argument that's going back and forth. You have to have enough awareness to know where to go. You don't have to memorize it, but you do need to say, when I need it, where can I go find it? Get that source in your environment. And then from a regulatory complexity perspective, the regulations are changing. There's an opportunity for you to add feedback. I'm sure the Institute would, lobby a position on your behalf if they knew that there was a position. You have to be active participants in the environment that we're in. And I know in Maryland, they'll ask us to write letters. They'll ask us to show up. Hopefully you're showing up and you're participating in your own environment and being an advocate for the profession. And then, of course, the two areas I left were technology and workforce changes. From a technology perspective, we know that in today's world, we've got the Internet of Things. We've got refrigerators that can call out for soda. When you walk in a grocery store, your phone starts beeping with aisle 9, aisle 10. We know that when I grew up, it was the Jetsons, and having a robot in your home was like a thing of unbelievable. It just wouldn't happen. And yet, if I say the wrong word, Google is like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. And isn't that nerve-wracking a little bit, right? That they would even wake up to know that you said some word. The world is changing. And so even as we talk about workforce changes, a lot of those workforce changes are coming from our generational differences. Our Zs, born typically in the late 1990s and the 2000s, and our millennial colleagues born in 1980 to about late 90s, they don't want to work the same way that Gen X. I'm a Gen X. And they don't want to work the same way. And I get that. The quality of life, you want to have the ability to have the summer, you want to live, you want to see the world. But you know what? There's no fun without finance. Because how many of you have ever been on a vacation without any money? There is no fun in that. So you need a great job to fund your habits. Our young people can mentor us, our young colleagues. They deserve their seat at the table. Yet at the same time, people who are boomers and traditionalists, they also have context and wisdom. There is a compromise and meeting of the minds. And I'm so delighted that I get to talk about what that means. And so technology is everywhere. And a lot of times, boomers mostly, and some traditionalists, they're in denial sometimes. So if you're in those categories, they say, well, Kimberly, this too shall pass. Well, I don't think social media is going to pass. I mean, I get it, and I say this everywhere I go because I'm going to own it. When Facebook came out, I was years before I actually had a Facebook page, because I was like, who wants to see me at the sunset? Who cares what I had for dinner? I mean, I was just like, does it even matter? And those famous last words, I wouldn't be working now if I got in the stock what I should have. So I say that to say, let's not ignore this by thinking this is going to pass, because it's not. Especially when you see in the manufacturing environments. That was before automation. This is after automation. Now, it might not be your job function, but if you're doing anything that a machine can do, over time, your companies may make tough decisions about who does that work. Okay? So it doesn't have to be scary if you're prepared. So we all need to bring our A game and pay attention to the mega trends, because it's important. We know that technology is driving transformation. If you were able to go into your environment and save money, figure out how to create and drive revenue, enable transformation, imagine how much more valuable you would be. Imagine how well positioned you would be if they were making tough choices.
What are the key points of your presentation this morning?
So the key points of my presentation are that we have to continually evolve and change, and looking at the trends will help us be in a better position.
Is this your first time here at the Chartered Accountants Conference?
Yes! This is amazing. The energy, the enthusiasm. I walked into this room and immediately felt energized, like caffeine. So I'm really excited to be here.
How would you say conferences of this nature benefit the industry?
So conferences like this, and what I really want to call out is that the president talked about doing a conference that wasn't about technical themes. So this conference that talks about other things that make us well-rounded, that give us perspective, that help us grow and learn, I think are amazing, because this is exactly what we need to know. We need to know what's going on in the world around us, and we need to discuss how those help us in our day-to-day jobs and how we may need to change our strategies.
Talk to us about the theme of your presentation, changing times, changing strategies.
So I really followed the conference theme, and I really wanted it to be informative. I wanted it to be a call to action. I wanted to talk about what every person in this room could do to be intentional and to be accountable. And so changing times just speaks to how technology is changing everything, and we need to change our strategies. So I think they're related, and I'm excited about that.
Is there anything else you want to add?
I think that we are all capable easily of doing what we need. When we talk about inspirational, motivational, hard work, persistence, high integrity, ethics, that's the very definition of the Institute of Chartered Jamaican Accountants. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the future.
If you look at the major economies of the world, so we looked at about 46 or 50 of the major economies, and we said, okay, are they seeing growth or not? And that chart tells you what percentage of those economies is seeing positive growth. And so what you've seen is, this is the first time, going back 10 years, that so many countries around the world, including here in Jamaica, by the way, are seeing strong growth. So it's a good thing, right? We've got, not only do we have strong economic growth globally, it's also synchronized, and that's generally a good thing because you want all countries to be sort of, you want a rising tide that lifts all the boats. The evidence from tariffs is that you end up supporting unproductive companies making horrible products at very high prices. I'm also a Gen Xer, as Kimberly is. I grew up in India. I can testify to crappy products at high prices made by horrible companies that shouldn't have existed, right? And so I'm sure there's folks in this room who can understand that as well. On the business side, we have companies coming in saying, oh, come on, I saw all this big global growth, there was tax reform, I was going to make all these waves of investments to capitalize, now you're telling me my supply chains are going to get messed up. So most companies are sort of in wait-and-see mode now. There's also a bunch of firms that are saying, you know what, I'm going to try to find local substitutes, and are coming to us and saying, I can't find them. I can't find local substitutes. So what am I going to do, right? Now, that's the broad evidence. Personally, I'm actually not sure what's going to happen. If that's what's going to happen, or if we might actually see some benefit, because there are examples, the little thing on the blue, which is hard to read, there are examples where tariffs have worked. Many Asian economies where companies have been protected for a while, as long as there is competition and as long as there's a push for productivity and investment, you actually do see the tariffs sometimes do work. So that gets us to why all of this is happening, which I think is useful for people to understand, certainly from the US perspective. What happens to the exchange rate? So the theory, the economic theory would tell you that all these tariffs at the end of the day are not going to make a difference because the currency will adjust and imports will become cheaper, exports will become more expensive, and you'll end up with a trade deficit again. You might see, a reallocation. So maybe there won't be as much metals imports, but there'll be some other imports, right? And so overall, the trade deficit will remain the same. That's quite possible. One thing that we've seen is when you look at the US dollar against a bunch of its trading partners, one of the reasons we think that the supply chain has gotten hollowed out is because the exchange rate, this is a chart of the US dollar against a bunch of currencies. The US dollar appreciated in the late 90s, and that is coincident with this sort of decline as a domestic supply chain. A lot of people call out attention to China, but it's not just China, it's the appreciation of the dollar. And what we've seen is that the dollar has stayed at a high value against some of these trading partners since then. So against the Japanese, against the Koreans, you've seen that the dollar has stayed high. And so it is entirely possible that the dollar might adjust, which means that we may end up in a situation back in the 1980s, which again has implications for trade. Now, any of you might remember your history. In the early 1980s with the Reagan administration, we went through something similar to what we're going through now, right? Voluntary restraints on imports, tariffs on a bunch of imports. The target then was Japan and Europe. Now it's China. It didn't work. It didn't work because the exchange rate appreciated and the deficit stayed. And so we ended up with what's called the Plaza Accords of 1985, which was a devaluation of the US dollar, effectively. Some of those people who were involved in those negotiations back in the 1980s are in the administration today. So you might see, I personally would be watching for that to see what happens to the exchange rate. But I am here to tell you, as I tell most of the companies that we work with, if you are holding your breath expecting that all this tariff noise will go away, you should probably start breathing. We have a very resilient global economy, strong, sustained growth for several years, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, but you're starting to see this concern. And one of the concerns, the most important concern that we're seeing from businesses is what is happening with all this trade and geopolitical uncertainty. And what is happening is the fact that there is an escalation, no question. And the escalation is happening under trade auspices that give the administration in the US a lot of authority and a lot of leeway to change practices. And if you look at the words that are coming out of the administration, you will see consistent language about this. Most of that is geared towards the third point, that is to turn around 20 years of a decline in the US supply chain and try to make things better there through more domestic sourcing, through more investment, and through more protectionist policies. And is that going to work? Is anybody's guess? The record, the empirical evidence is not strong. But then we've also not had this kind of a situation where you've got an administration saying, we're going to try to do this.
Give us some feedback on your presentation today.
Well, I think, we wanted to make the point about what's going on with the broader global economy, issues around trade and tariffs, which I know are on top of mind for most people. They are concerned about what they're seeing coming out of the US. And so we wanted to make sure that we kind of covered some of those issues. I think the main point that I wanted to make was that we are in slightly a different environment where you do have a lot of global growth going on. It's been 10 years since the global economy has been in this situation where there's been such strong growth. And so having these trade issues, these tariffs issues are a little bit of a cloud that a lot of business executives have been telling us are certainly concerns for us, and so that's why we've been developing a perspective on that.
Speak to some of the trends in your field and how they help or harm our local trade.
Well, I think there's a couple of trends that I'd probably call out. One is the fact that even though you've had very strong global growth, it hasn't translated to the kind of global trade and investment flows that we've got used to at least last decade. So 10 years ago, we were in a strong period of global growth, and there was a lot of global trade, there was a lot of global investment, cross-border flows of services and goods. This time, it's still strong growth, but there's not commensurate growth in trade and investment. And so one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is why that's happening. And then certainly now that you've seen more action on tariffs coming from the US administration, that's also acting as a dampener on further growth of trade and investment. So I think one of the big things that we're seeing is the fact that most people have been wondering whether the tariffs are really going to, are they going to stick around? Do you just wait it out? And one of the points we've been trying to make is to understand why the tariffs are coming, by looking at issues around the domestic supply chain, particularly in some of these advanced industries, where what we've seen is that over the last 20 years or so, the majority of the growth that the American manufacturing sector has seen has not been shared by small and mid-sized companies in the domestic supply chain. All of that growth has gone to the largest companies, and the smaller and mid-sized firms in the domestic supply chain, by and large, have seen negative growth rates. You've seen companies or establishments shutting down. And that matters because the majority of workers, the majority of investment is in that supply chain. And so when the supply chain doesn't see strong growth, it has a knock-on effect on things like wage growth or investment growth or technology readiness or productivity growth, right? And so that's really what we're seeing, or what we're looking for is when you have this new kind of environment around tariffs, is that combined with things like tax reform, are you actually going to see a wave of investment coming into the supply chain? That's what we're looking for.
Talk to us about what's unique about the design of this conference.
This conference is geared towards getting persons prepared for the change that is happening, the disruption that is happening in the world today, and for our leaders to understand the change and what it means for them. And that's what's unique about it. In fact, that we are focusing on it. It's not really a numbers crunching IFRS conference. It's really a true business conference where we can focus on other things outside of accounting.
What were some expectations that you had of this conference?
First of all, I expected to have a very high level of participation from our members and from the business community. I expect that our presenters would deliver on the topics that were selected for them in accordance with the objectives of the ICAJ. And so far, we are very pleased that we are meeting those objectives. It's changing time, changing strategies, and we really like to impart knowledge to our membership and to the business community. So I think that expectation is paramount.
More from the ICAJ Business Conference when we return. If you are just joining us, Business Access TV is here at the Jamaica Pegasus for the ICAJ Annual Business Conference.
Let's talk about encryption for a little bit. Encryption today is not what it used to be. Encryption today is actually very, very simple. I mean, you can do it on your phone, on your laptop, on your tablets with just a couple of clicks. So by all means, encrypt the data that you consider sensitive. It's very easy to do, and it's a very, very effective way to achieve data security. If an app that you're looking at or looking at installing, if it seems too good to be true, chances are it really is too good to be true. I mean, this one app is not going to change the world with just a couple of clicks. That's not impossible. You want to ensure that only the applications that you have on your devices are the applications that are necessary for the execution of your function, of your job function. So don't have things that are installed on there that is just on there just because it looks kind of cool. It's nice to have that sort of stuff. Many times those apps, especially the ones that seem too good to be true, all they are backdoors for stealing your data. Email is the most widely used tool to compromise data security. It's a low-hanging fruit. The truth is, hackers by nature are actually very lazy people that really don't have to work hard for what it is that they're getting. So if they can do something, if they can send out 1 million emails with malicious content or malicious link, all they're really interested in is that 100 people click on it. They're not really interested that 1 million people have actually clicked on it. And really and truly is, as a hacker, they actually don't want to be in your environment, because if they're in your environment, then the likelihood of getting caught increases. So if they can do it remotely, it's much better for them. And they do that by email, by sending an email with a compromised link or a compromised attachment. So always think before you click on any form of attachments that with any email at all. I'll actually take a step back and say to you, think before you even open the email. Because I've seen situations today where the email will come with an attachment, but the attachment is a self-executing attachment. So once you click on the email itself, the attachment executes in the background, steals your data. I know there's a practice that, especially for people who use Outlook, to have the preview pane of the email up and running, because it makes life easier. It is, because you can quickly glance at the preview pane and say, all right, this is what it's about, and you can make a decision about whether to act or not to act. I'd actually recommend that you turn it off, because those self-executing emails actually run once the preview pane comes up. Another thing that you want to do is you want to keep your systems up to date. You want to ensure that the applications that are running on your devices, whether it's your phone, your tablet, or your computer, are up to date. Nearly all the time a vendor releases an update, it's nearly always to fix a security hole. Oftentimes, it's, a small portion of the time is for functionality. If they're going to release functionality, they actually release a new version of the application. But once they publish an update for the application, nearly all the time, it is a security-related hole that they're trying to fix. There are so many vulnerabilities that exist today with so many applications that you have to, as soon as a newer version comes out, you want to ensure that you keep your system up to date and install the latest versions of software. It's often you have applications or you have data on your devices, and the usage of that data is just, you have it just because. No, don't keep data on your machine just because you need to have it on there. Because it becomes unused over time, it becomes old and you forget about it, and then the next time you remember about it is when you're in the headlines because, suddenly company data is out there, your machine was compromised, and you remember, oh, I had this folder on my machine. One of the things that we recommend is that once you're done, you set expiration on the data sets that you're using. So once you're done with something, after the reasonable reporting period has passed, move it, archive it into a secure location, an offsite storage or something like that. Now, backup is often not associated with security. It's often associated with other components of IT. But backup is actually a very important component in security. If we think back to the security triad, backup is affected by the availability component of that triad. Now, think of if, for argument's sake, you suffered a compromise of any kind, and your data becomes corrupt or lost or anything like that. The absence of a functioning or a proper backup means that the data is no longer available. It means that the system is no longer available. It means that the application is no longer available. And you have failed the availability component of the triad, and therefore you have failed data security. So it's very important to have verifiable backups. Don't just back up your data and say, all right, fine, I'll copy these files over to this folder, I'll run the backup process in this application, and it has copied the file and stored them in a location, in a secure location. Always verify them. We've seen an example where we were called in to investigate a compromise, and the compromise was so bad that we said to the customer, look, give me a backup set, let's start to recover from the backup set. And they diligently showed us the log of their backups. The backup happened every night. The technician checked it off that it was backed up and so on. But when we went to the backup was actually compromised as well. So they're ticking it off that it's being backed up, but nobody's checking to say, is this backup a backup of the compromised data? It just so happens that it was backup of the compromised data, but the backup runs and it says it's completed successfully, and they tick the box. Yes, we've backed up our data. One of the things that I'd recommend here also is that security awareness training, one of the things that we try to do is we try to connect it personally. I know a lot of times, people are doing their jobs and they kind of abstract their work life from their personal life. So one of the things that we do is we try to connect security and data security in particular to your own personal situation. So we'll talk about things like, consider things like how would a compromise of your bank accounts affect you personally, right? And think about all the emotions and everything that goes with that. You can't pay a mortgage and all of that sort of stuff. Think about what will happen if that exact same compromise would happen in the company's bank accounts. People can't get paid, suppliers can't get paid, and that sort of stuff. So one of the things I do, if you try to connect it on a personal level, and you see the gravity or the impact of the situation personally, then it's easier to translate that into business. Achieving data security is not a line in the sand that you draw and you say, boy, all right, I've done all of these things, so my data is now secure. It's a continual process. You have to keep assessing. You have to keep looking at your data needs, your data assets, and saying, all right, is the risk that we face today the same tomorrow? And you have to continually improve. It's a process of continual improvement. I think in the security circles, we have a common thought that there are really just two types of businesses in the world. Those who have been hacked and those who don't know they've been hacked. And that's a reality. It takes about, the average security incident takes about 30 days to be discovered. And for companies that their pockets are, they're deep and they're invested in it, it may take another 180 days to recover from it. So it could be up to a year in many instances that you don't even know that you've been compromised. Many businesses don't ever recover from a compromise. So to achieve data security, do something. There are many things on the list that are simple to do. They're low-hanging fruits. Just do them. Because doing something is much better than doing nothing and assuming that you've never had a compromise.
The way the technology is going now, it's not even a race for relevance. It's a race for survival. Because if you're not with it, you're going to die. Right? In fact, you have to be savvy. So I was tempted to come up here with paper, but I make sure I come with the iPhone. Because if you go anywhere you're presenting now from paper, you're not cutting it. So sometimes even you don't have anything on the phone, you carry it up here. So, right? And some people do it. You know that? Yeah, man, them walk up with the phone and yes, and moving and touching on the phone, right? But it's the look, right? And it's the image. And we're going to talk about the image because we really have to change it. Because obviously, technology affords us to do things cheaper, more efficient, all of the above in terms of that. So there are some opportunities there for us finance people. So what's the imperative of our finance professional? First of all, we have to apprise ourselves with the technology that's available across. Right? We're going to discuss some of them, but what I'm saying is that whatever we can do in this small window cannot replace the plethora of different applications that are out there. So as a finance professional within your industry, you have to be researching, talking to IT, looking overseas to ensure that you're aware what is out there. Companies are going through rapid technological change. It's emotionally charged. Every day you hear that there's a list coming out, and you wonder if you're named upon the list. Nobody understand what I'm talking about? It's reality, right? So when we're doing technological changes, right, it calls for proper leadership. And it can happen in many ways. You can even get sabotaged. Because if you don't treat people well, they can sabotage you in the transformation process. So this managing of the organizational impact is key. And I would recommend that if it is major enough, get what we call change management help. Right? You may need people who are adept at change management to guide you through this process. Focus on talent and skills. Very critical. The skills that we needed yesterday and the talent are not necessarily what we need today and going forward. And that's one of the challenges that we have. Some tough decisions may have to be taken, and we may have to redeploy people. But you have to make sure that we have the right talent and skill to take their organization forward based on the new technologies that we are applying. Cashier-free store. Real. Amazon has this. You have an Amazon card. You just walk into the store, you swipe, go in, take what you want, leave, and the process send the bill to you. Nobody's involved. Understand that implications for that. In fact, a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I was in Israel and on a tour. And in there you can do the Israel tour. It's a very good tour. But we stopped at a gas station with the tour guide and put the nozzle in his tank, full up, drove out. I asked him, nobody was involved. He explained to me that the nozzle has a microchip, and so does the car tank. The amount of gas that he's taking is recorded, transmitted by a bill to his company from the gas station. Nobody involved. Right? So I saw that, and it wasn't even last year, this is over 2 years ago. This is a sign of where we are and where we are going. So I'm just putting these things up there. And if you want to research it, fine. But I'm just trying to tell you, because we used to talk about the future. The Eptones have a song that said, the future is here, my dear. Because the future is here. So all that we're talking about, we used to talk about their emerging technologies. Nah, the technology is here. We have to be very cognizant of social media. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm on all of them. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of them. Because we have communicate and keeping in touch with your team members, knowing what they're doing, your children, your niece, and nephew, and all of that, this social media thing. So I'm saying to us as chartered accountants, don't have any phobia about it. Get with the program. So our job is not to be fearful of what is happening. Our job is to adapt to the change and make sure that we can perform as professionals under the new systems. Right? Our brain, Tavi. In fact, let's say a man's brain, it start work from in his mother's womb and don't stop work at all right until adulthood. When a man's brain stop work, when his wife asks him, where were you last night, honey? That's the only time a man's brain stop work. Right? But seriously, the computers cannot really replace us. But they will make us redundant if we don't adapt to change. So in summary, as I said before, I didn't intend to give you a technical presentation. I really want to give you what you call a reality check to make sure that you understand that these technologies, I've been part of change process for a number of years, but never before have I seen so much coming at me in a short space of time. You understand? It's not like one time when you have a time, you don't have no room for error. It's coming, right? Rapid, rapid, rapid. And I'm saying, as accountants, we have to deal with it, grasp opportunities, make things better for ourselves and the organization, and just don't let the bus leave us. All in all, before wrapping up, the question is, are you ready? And I hope you're ready.
PwC is a sponsor here today. Talk to us about that partnership.
Yeah, well, PwC, we are very happy to sponsor this conference. The Institute, we have been sponsoring it a few years now. We think it's a very important conference for accountants to maintain their relevance in a very dynamic environment. We think it's value for money to get all stakeholders on board on a conference like this, to share some very good ideas, cover some good topics. So we are always on board and we'll continue to be on board with it.
Today you are also a presenter. Speak to us about the main points of your presentation.
The topic of my presentation was professional accountants maintaining relevance in the digital age. So it's all to do with us as accountants moving with the pace of technology, because we all know technology is taking over almost everything. So we have to ensure that we take steps to make sure that we are relevant. There are opportunities, there are challenges. So my presentation covered a number of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, cyber security, cloud computing, number of different areas. Encouraging the accountants to get on board, familiarize yourself with all these technologies to ensure that you can function properly in the digital age.
Outside of functioning properly in the digital age, what advice would you give young professionals who want to become accountants?
Well, it's a noble profession. I don't think there's a profession that gives you the wide insight into businesses as auditing and accounting. It's really broad-based. I would encourage youngsters to take a serious look at it. I think career choice is very critical. You have to look at something that you have the aptitude for, something that can pay your bills, and something that you like, because those three have to go together. So that's my advice. I'm not going to go to say everybody must turn an accountant. Do the research and make sure. But I'm telling you that's an attractive profession. It's a plethora because of activities, because you have auditors, you have forensic auditors, you have internal auditors, you have financial analysts, chief accountants. So there's a wide range in the profession that you can get into.
I'm pleased to be here to talk to you about T-Tech. T-Tech is the first company to be listed on the Junior Stock Exchange and as an IT firm, and we provide managed services to persons in the IT space. So if you have network servers to be managed, we will look after that for you, provide a service desk. We also help you to implement your cybersecurity program.
Why did you decide to be a sponsor here today?
Well, one, we work closely with financial members of financial profession because they tend to also supervise IT professionals, and also we recognize that the financial profession needs to understand the importance of cybersecurity.
Give us some clarity on BPOs and share some benefits.
Well, in terms of clarity, overall it's an industry that's very people-centric. So it hires a lot of folks, and it also enables their growth and development. And if I were to think of some what you'd call advantages of the industry, I would say, simply put, it creates options that are not limited by age, race, nationality, or any other factor that usually impacts corporate America. In my example, personally, I was a vice president at age 25 in a Fortune 500 company. There's not many industries that take that kind of a chance on someone who is young and who does not necessarily meet the status quo. These conferences from a BPO perspective, for me, the biggest advantage is there's a lot of negative perception and a lot of negative press out there about the industry. And what it does, it deters people who could really have an impact to come in and succeed. So from functions like this, my intention is always to correct those myths and to ensure that people view the industry in a positive light, because it is indeed a positive industry.
So talk to us about CPA Canada. What do you guys do?
Sure. CPA Canada, CPA, Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. We are Canada's national accounting designation. But as much as I say Canada, we are 100% recognized globally. As such, we are affiliate members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Jamaica and recognized by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Caribbean. Basically, if someone wants to become an accountant, they usually do a first degree, sometimes they choose to do a second. But at some point in time, they need to become a qualified accountant. Accountancy, like other professions, are highly governed, and as a result, one needs to choose a designation to qualify under. CPA Canada is one such option. It is 100% available to persons who are living in Jamaica. Fortunately, it's 2018, and there's no longer the need to actually go to Canada to earn the designation. Someone can actually sit in Jamaica, continue working, enjoy their family life, and study at the same time. This is actually our second year as a sponsor of the ICAJ conference. It's a great opportunity for us to maintain connections and ties and support our members who are based in Jamaica. So some of these persons who are present here today are actually Canadian CPAs active in Jamaica. And it's also a good touch point for the younger ones who are still undecided as to what designations they want to do. And for those who are qualified, we have a lot of certificate programs that they can now subscribe to. So it's a wonderful opportunity. I particularly like this conference because it's not just 100% accounting topics per se, which can get very technical. It's more of a business conference and really touches issues that are affecting us in the business community today.
Speak to us about the mandate of the ICAJ.
So the ICAJ is the institute that governs the accounting profession. So our members are those persons who have qualified in accountancy to earn a designation as chartered accountants. So essentially our job is to engage with those members, help manage them through their career, and to provide for new members a training of students and the coaching and mentorship of students so that they can become chartered accountants one day. So this is a business conference, and the theme is meant to be there for covering non-accounting issues, because we're trying to attract an audience other than our traditional membership. So the last 3 years, we've done the Megatrends hashtag. So that's why it's 3.0, Megatrends 3.0. The feedback has been extremely positive. I think people like the topics. I've got very positive feedback on the speakers themselves. There's good energy in the room, there's good buzz. So from that perspective, the conference has met our objectives. We have a Probably our largest delegate list ever, just over 300 people. There are about 50 people online. So from a total attendance, yes, it probably has checked that box. From a diversity of the persons who are attending, I think we've fallen a bit short. So we need to figure out how we bring more people into the discussion. This is not intended to be focused only on accountants. So to the extent that we wanted to see more bankers, attorneys, other professions, engineers, we have a topic coming up on the environment and disposal of plastics and how we manage plastics in our economy, what challenges and opportunities that present. That's not an accounting discussion. That's a discussion that anyone who lives and works in Jamaica should be interested in. And so diversity, I think we can improve that. From a production perspective, I think, again, this year we have done a better job than prior years. So we're continuously improving, but I think we can still take the production level up a notch. We want it to be a really high impact type of conference. So you feel as if at the moment you walk in that this is something new and different every year. So we're going to work on those two aspects in the future.
There you have it, another staging of the ICAJ Business Conference. I've been your host, Amita Prasad Webb, and thank you for watching Business Access TV, serious about business.